We start? Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to be here. We're going to speak about innovation. The subject is balancing innovation and regulation in the age of AI-driven platform. I'm not sure it is really necessary to. So I'm Antoine Labaye, a partner at FRÉGET, GLASER and ASSOCIÉS in Paris. I'm not sure it is really necessary to explore and to remind how AI is now reshaping the landscape and moving everything in our professional or even personal lives, because I'm sure that everyone here now then is perfectly aware about the AI changes. But what we are going to focus today is more the balance we can do and between regulation of AI and also enhance innovation. So maybe main question to of the discussion will be how can we anticipate potential competition risk raised by AI-driven platforms without undermining the dynamic forces of innovation, especially in digital markets. So I'm joined over the table to discuss this question by Juliette Salo, sorry, legal counsel at Booking.com, Emmanuel Fou, which is economist and partner at Analysis Group, and Liliana Eskenazi, which is lawyer in competition at partner at FRÉGET GLASER. My first question before we dive in the subject will be for Juliette. And maybe Juliette, you can sketch and describe how a company like Booking uses AI today and how it is reshaping your business and operationally and for customers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So at booking.com, our mission, hopefully that resonates with you, is to make it easier for everyone to experience the world. And we make it easier by investing in and developing tech and AI to remove friction out of the trip. And so we try to do this for travelers. We've launched a number of AI-powered features that help with travel planning. I'll give you a few examples. There's something called the smart filters. So you might have seen on the booking website, there's a lot of different filters when you go through your search results. And with the smart filters, you can describe your property, your ideal property, and this will scan through those filters and automatically apply the most relevant ones. So that's an example. There's also something called property Q&A. So you're, looking at a relevant property you're interested in, and you're wondering, is there a swimming pool? Or you might have some slightly more complex questions. You can just use that, and the tool will instantly retrieve relevant information to save you some time, scrolling through the property listing, trying to get that information yourself. There's also something called review summaries. So same idea as property Q&A, but this time with guest reviews. So that gives you an idea. We're also, investing in new tools, something called the AI trip planner. So it's a lot of exciting new features, and they all have the same goal, which is to simplify, these key steps in the planning process of your trip, to make it easier for you to find the perfect place to stay and to book it with confidence. So that's what we do on the sort of traveler side. And then on the partner side, we also want some AI powered features to help our partners. And every year we do these surveys, they're called accommodation barometer. And we ask partners about the challenges they face around tech and AI. And what comes back from these surveys is things like high costs and integration complexity and lack of expertise. And all of these, come as barriers to digital adoption. And if you're a larger hotel chain, you can leverage some of your sort of in-house tech to help. but for smaller businesses, um, small independent hotels, they often lack access to these tools. And so to help with this, we've promoted something called the Tech Stack Advisor, and that's a Gen AI driven tool that gives hoteliers some customized recommendations on how to modernize their tech infrastructure. So, so this is, some examples both on the traveler and partner side around what we do today.
Thank you very much, Juliette, for these elements. Maybe Liliana, just from legal perspective, could you just maybe tell us what are the core competition laws questions raised by AI in Europe and even worldwide, if you want?
Thank you, Antoine. And thank you, Juliette, for doing this introduction, because I think it's really helpful to see how, well, AI is everywhere. Everybody is talking about AI. It's very hype. And as some of you maybe heard on the first panel, the vice president of the French Competition Authority mentioned that digital markets are also on the competition authority's radars. But we, as competition lawyers, we hear all this hype and technological talk, and I mean, we are lawyers, so we keep coming back to the concepts that we know. So what I would try to do is to basically link the dots and try to see how these new concepts and how these new use cases and usage of AI tools come in contact with competition law. Why is competition law an issue, and how these technologies fall into the radar not only of competition law but also more and more so regulation. So to try and sketch out, using the basic competition law concepts, why AI use can raise competition concerns. And competition law, as you know, we have anti-competitive agreements, abuse of dominance, and merge control, and how this comes into play with AI use. So we have talked a lot, even before AI becomes hype, we have talked about algorithmic collusion, and this has been one of the hot topics for the last, I would say, maybe 5, even 10 years. And so a lot has been written on the topic. And today it has become even more more of a hot topic, in the sense that AI allows for that algorithmic alignment, often on pricing. And the core issue, because this is the question, what are the core issues in terms of competition law, is, well, you feel that there is alignment, possibly harmonization of pricing due to interaction of AI agents, but tomorrow, or today, if a competition authority wishes to investigate, how would they prove agreement? Is an AI bot or an AI agent sufficiently autonomous, or is it under the control of humans? So in terms of competition analysis, is there an agreement when AI agents just go and scrape content and analyze and steer a company's prices to become as harmonized as possible with the competitors, or put them at a higher tag level? So the issue from competition perspective is there collusion? And obviously AI makes it even more complicated, because artificial intelligence is a tool that today is able to act on its own through self-learning. So the question is about the degree to which an agreement can be shown and proven from a competition law perspective. From looking at abuse of dominance, well, as you all know, the angle which has been tackled so far in studies that come from competition authorities and from legal literature is, well, AI requires data scaling, and the more data you have, the more you can do with your AI tools, and the more you can entrench your power if you're a powerful company. So it's a sort of virtuous or vicious circle. The more you have, the more power you have, the more you can make use of AI, and the more you become entrenched in your incumbent's position, and the more it creates barriers to entry. And then once you have created barriers to entry, obviously that leads possibly to foreclosure. And then once you have this power, how you can use it to your own profit. And there's classical categories of exclusionary and exploitative practice. Exclusionary, you can see it with the mechanisms of recommendation, ranking, and practices such as self-preferencing that are not particularly specific to the use of AI tools, because we have already seen it, notably in the Google Shopping case, which illustrates perfectly the self-preferencing, which kind of sets the frame for analyzing self-preferencing. But with AI tools, you can clearly see the risks from a competition law perspective, that through these mechanisms, you can steer consumers through the ranking mechanisms, through the individualized offers, how you can steer consumers to your own offers and therefore create self-preferencing and therefore create foreclosure effects. And then from an exploitative practice perspective, you can also see the risk of exploitative pricing, for example, when you use AI tools to offer extremely personalized pricing. For example, you can collect data about consumer habits, and you can, again, through the recommendations or through knowledge the AI tool gathers from the market, it offers personalized pricing, which can be below cost or, on the contrary, excessive pricing. So these are examples of use of AI tools that can fall within the scope of competition law. Obviously, it is a challenge both for companies that obviously need to make sure that by using these tools, they are compliant with competition law. But it's a challenge also for competition authorities, because it becomes more and more difficult to tackle those practices, and hence the bigger role today that is granted to ex ante regulation, and we see it with the DMA, which is not yet applicable to AI, but which sets out obligations for gatekeepers in other digital activities, digital sector activities. We see it a little bit with a lot with the AI Act, which is focusing on AI tools. So there's more and more ex ante regulation, and therefore more and more constraints for companies that have to comply with all those constraints. And we come to, I think, to the main topic of this panel, which we'll try to explore, was the limit of where do these constraints meet, and whether they're good or bad for innovation. But I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Liana. And maybe let's jump to some economic perspective. And Emmanuel, uh, do you think there is some criteria or indicators that competition authority, regulators should use to regulate and to balance whether AI-driven competition is healthy or is exclusionary?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So Liana actually already touched upon some of these points. So, just to give some framework about the way we can think about it, I guess we can look at the different inputs, I mean, the different stacks of AI competition or AI models. So you can start with the input. So, to build an AI model, you need some data, you need a computing power. You can think about the models and how you can move the models from one platform, from one cloud provider to another. And then you can think about distribution of these models. And we'll see, that each point we can relate to some standard concepts in competition law or competition economics. But also think about AI is changing the way we should think about this. So if I start along these stacks, so all these levels are related. So that means, if you change the condition or if you introduce a distortion at some level, it's going to have an impact on others. So let's start with the inputs. So to run an AI model, you need some huge computing powers, and that's because, as Liana said, if you need a good AI model, if you want, to be at the edge of competition, you need the model to be extremely large. So you need many parameters in kind of technical terms. So you need what we call weights, a lot of weights in the models. And so that means huge computing powers. If you look at the cost of training the last models like ChatGPT-5, it's more than $1 billion. So, in terms of cost to access this power is just huge. So the kind of indicators we could look at is, traditional measures of access to these resources. So, do you have some exclusivity to access this computing power? Do you have some access that's limited to only firms that are vertically integrated? So that's what we call the hyperscalers. So it's all the environment developed, for instance, by Amazon and Google. So you have all the bricks that you need to run the AI model and distribute it. And so, that's kind of a package. And so obviously, if you need access to this, then you're in a different type of competition. You have to look as well at about the conditions for independent developers to access these resources. Are they put in a queue? Is it more costly for them? Do they need some very strong contractual terms to access the resource? Then we can turn to data, which is kind of similar in the sense that, again, to get a very efficient AI model, you need a lot of data and you need a lot of high quality data. So the thing here is I think we have two features is that getting this data is costly. So because you need access to these huge data sets and you don't have that many high quality data sets around. Another way to put it is that you have a small number of actors controlling access to this data. And so what you want to look at for this specific parameter is how easy to access the data. So you could look at licensing agreements between the firms or the set of firms holding the rights to this data. So you could think about publishers or newspapers that have access to some important data and how they license it to developers of AI models. So that could be something you want to look at. The other input that you need, and we've just heard about it in the competition authority roundtables, is high expertise. So you need some skills that are scarce. And I guess we've all heard about the hundreds of million packages, pay packages that some firms are offering to top researchers. And so that shows the intensity of competition. So firms are willing to bid very highly to get access to this data. And so again, what type of indicators? Well, do we have no poach agreements? Is it easy to move labor from one firm to another? So these are kind of classical things, but these are extremely important for AI models. Now, if you turn to models, then it's more about do we have models that are ported? I mean, how easy is it to port a model from one platform to another? And so you can think about very simply, what is the cost of downloading the data? So that's what we call egress fees. So usually it's free to upload data on the platform, but it's not free to download the data. Well, if I'm a developer and suddenly I want to switch to another platform, I need to download everything. And this cost may actually be extremely large. So that's, a very simple barrier to exit. Another thing is what we call the fine tunes, but is similar to the data is, can I get the parameters that result from training the model from the supplier of the server and all the infrastructure? Well, if I can't, then it's very difficult to exit. We can move to the last step, which is distribution. Then I think everyone has in mind the partnerships between the AI model suppliers and some very large firms like Microsoft or Google. There are many of them, and we understand why, because as I said, you need access to data, and so these firms have the data. You need access to computing power, and so they have it. What you need also is access to distribution. So you need access to the customers to get your model, not only to sell your model, but also to train the model. Again, so that gives you a huge advantage if you can have access to a firm that is very skilled at distributing the products. So think, Microsoft or Google who are doing this. Again, types of criteria you want to look at. Do you have some exclusivity agreements? Is it very costly to enter? Once you are into the partnerships, do you have incentives for the partner to influence your innovations that are going to change the way you compete on the market and so on? The last point maybe I want to talk, because Liliana, as you said a few words about it, is a collusion through algorithm. So it's different from the ones I talked about just before, because there we are not about the models and the inputs, but uh, what are the criteria we should think about in terms of algorithmic collusion? So we all know that, I mean, it has been proved now for some years that this algorithm can collude without exchanging any information. So you just give them the information set, and they're going to reach not only a collusive outcome, but also they will devise a punishment strategy that makes this equilibrium sustainable. What's been interesting more recently is that that works as well with LLM models, so the large language models like ChatGPT, and that's even more impressive because there's nothing in the model that says you should work like this. You only tell the model, okay, these are the prices, so past prices, these are the past profits, and the only thing you have to do is maximize profits, and you iterate. So each day, every week, every month, you provide the new prices, the new demand, and so on. It's going to reach a collusive equilibrium. Okay, even though there's nothing about collusion within the model. What are the indicators? Well, it's kind of tricky because then it's how information is exchanged, how is the model trained, is there any consultant that is going to use the model and sell it to different firms and they use the same training data sets without knowing it? So that becomes a bit tricky. So just to conclude, so two things that are important for the inputs, the partnerships, and so on. The issue is bottlenecks. Okay, so it's something we know how to deal with in competition economics and competition law. So anything that is going to increase the barriers to entry is going to make these bottlenecks even tighter. And so that's not that's the bad indicator of competition. The other thing is the feedback loops. As Juliana said, well, if I have a very strong model and I have a partnership, I have access to zillions of customers. If I have access to more customers, I have access to more data. And so that gives me a better model and so on. So this feedback loop is going to reinforce itself. And so you must make sure that at every step within the loop, it remains contestable.
So thank you, Mariano. I guess it raises a lot of questions for company, and maybe Juliet, from your in-house perspective, you can just tell us what, according to you, are the key challenges, both compliance and operational challenges for company who want to implement AI in such a moving regulation framework.
Yes, and I think here of innovation moves faster than regulation. So for an in-house counsel, it's really a challenge to keep up with both. Um, but we work really hard to ensure that we develop and use AI in compliance with regulatory frameworks. So that's the more sort of direct legislation like the AI Act, DMA, DSA, but there's also the big principles like the right to privacy, fair treatment, and making sure that we don't mislead or give the wrong information. Um, I think looking at some of the key risks that we want to prevent, first of all, there's privacy and data security. As we've said, AI often relies on large amounts of data. Um, and if you mishandle or don't use properly personal data or sensitive information, that can lead to privacy violations, to data breaches. And to prevent such risks, we have some clear rules around what we do with the data we collect. And so that's, for example, strict requirements for the machine learning training data, including not to use any sensitive data and to minimize the use of any personal data in the machine learning models. Other elements we have in place is also informing customers when they interact with AI that they shouldn't provide personal data. So it's things like that for privacy, these privacy risks. Another risk is also around the lack of transparency. It's really a challenge to balance providing enough and correct information at the right time for customers. So if it's through some banners, some T's and C's, but also making sure we have some clear and easy to navigate interface, because as a customer, as a user, this is really what you want. So yeah, that's another risk, another challenge. There's also the risk of AI leading to sort of biased or discriminatory outcomes. We know that AI can amplify existing biases in the data, and AI can be used unethically, whether that's intentional or not. And to prevent such risks from happening, we have some processes in place to perform checks both before model development and also post training to check on any outputs. And around this risk, it's also important to have some proper content moderation frameworks in place to ensure really we create a safe environment. So yeah, I think preventing these risks for a company like Booking.com is not just a regulatory or an ethical imperative. It's also really critical to maintain the trust that the users put in us. So that's on the risk side. On the sort of operational side, that means that really all AI development or use cases are subject to a really robust AI risk assessment and legal and compliance reviews. So as a company, we need to be very nimble and to work across legal teams, across areas of the business with machine learning practitioners, and within the legal team, within the risk and control team, with different practice areas, whether that's privacy, competition, consumer. It's really a big cross-functional effort. Um, and through these reviews, we discuss extensively, we research extensively how we can consider best practices and make sure we implement all of this, also in line with our business needs and our company values. And through this process, this led us to create our internal AI standards, and this is something we use to guide our AI tech development. And it's a standard that gives everyone some guardrails for responsible AI usage in accordance with applicable laws.
Thank you very much. Liana, maybe you want to react, but we are running a bit late, so maybe 5 minutes. So
Yeah, very quickly, I think that when listening to Juliette, I have the impression that it's a bit like tightrope walking when you're in-house counsel, because if you lean a little bit too far on one side, you fall into the Data or AI Act, and if you lean on the other side, then it's GDPR and DMA, and then if you fall altogether, that's competition law waiting underneath. So it's often a very challenging exercise from what I see and understand. So I think that maybe the main challenge is reconciling all those sets of regulations and trying to be compliant with these ex ante regulations piling up, and trying to make some sense, and not to to remain coherent, because there are many regulations and sometimes they might be contradictory. For example, like the Data Act that mandates sharing some certain types of data. But we know from competition law that when you share data with your competitors, it can be exchange of commercially sensitive information. So how do you reconcile this? So it can be, I think, quite challenging to find the right middle and the right ground to comply with all of this. And I think he's really the changing role of us lawyers, and especially in-house counsel, that have to not only to be on top of the latest regulations, but also on top of the latest technology. And I understand that there's a lot of exchanges with data scientists, people really on the business and engineering side, and it's important. And actually, our role today is to try to translate the the requirements of competition law so that engineers can embed this, because the expectation of regulatory authorities is that companies work on compliance by design. So basically, you need to embed compliance in your technologies and products. And so we as lawyers need to be able to translate these requirements to the engineers so that they can integrate them in the developments, but also the other way around, which says that engineers need to explain to us lawyers what's exactly on stake and not leave us into the darkness of the black box, as you always, as you now tend to call this, these tools, and help us work through these mechanisms and make them more explainable, because this is also part of the new obligations for companies being able to explain. So part of transparency is not only just sharing data, information, making everything very open and very accessible to everyone, but rather giving the framework of what are the criteria that I use, how I can explain what my AI tool or any digital tool is doing and behaving. So that tomorrow or today when the regulatory or competition authority asks me, I'm able to explain that I'm not using something that's discriminatory by design or self-preferencing by design. And I think that's the main challenge for us lawyers in this landscape.
Thank you. Maybe just Juliette, and a bit after we will just one question for Juliette, and after we have a question from Emmanuel. How, in a very practical view, how company like Booking.com do the balance between the benefits of AI and efficiency and everything with the risk of being perceived as dominant or opaque? How do you do it?
Yeah, I think to echo what you are saying, Liliana, at the intersection of all of these digital uh, new regulation about digital platforms and AI, there are really these joint objectives to ensure fair competition, to bring transparency, and to protect fundamental rights. And this puts companies like Booking.com, which have been designated as gatekeepers um, or VLOPs, under additional obligations and also scrutiny, in particular when it comes to data. And we've always committed to handling personal data of our travelers responsibly, and we're transparent about processing of personal data to earn and retain travelers' trust. But to comply with the DMA, for example, we've also implemented some additional controls over these personal data flows within our business. And just to take an example, one area where AI and machine learning comes into play, obviously, is ranking and indexing. And there are specific DMA obligations for gatekeepers on this to apply transparent, fair, non-discriminatory conditions. So we maintain mechanisms for ranking and display on the Booking.com platform that are designed to be neutral regarding the source of the inventory. And we've implemented a range of controls on these requirements, and we conduct regular risk assessments to ensure that we monitor any changes to ranking algorithm or machine learning models. So that's on the DMA. On the DSA, there's also requirements to be transparent about how our recommendation systems work. And for example, we explain in our customer terms of service how we use recommendation systems. That's something we do for our search results, but there's other recommendation systems. Like, for example, if you look at trending destinations, or we have another category called, for example, like homes, guest love. So we explain based on which factors we provide these recommendations, how our default ranking works, how the sorting option works, and also how users can change their settings so that our recommendation systems do not provide personalized recommendations if that's something the user doesn't want.
Thank you. Emmanuel, do you want to have a word in this specific topics?
Well, yeah, very briefly, I guess. I think the trade-off is pretty clear. I mean, because we see the benefits of adopting AI. It's increased efficiency. It might decrease the marginal cost of production, and you're going to launch new products. The thing is that because of the characteristics of the market, you may have a market that tilts towards one dominant firm or a few dominant firms because of this effect, these feedback loops. And so pretty quickly you reach an equilibrium where with some market power. And so there is a kind of balance. I mean, we have to reach the balance between dynamic efficiency and contestability. And so, as Juliette said, I think you have all these things you have to take into account, and you have, as a firm, I guess, as a business, you have to be transparent and explain how you're doing these models, how you use them, how they are interoperable, and maybe to some point, some other firms may access the similar models. The key idea, but it's going to be very standard, is that we should keep these markets contestable. And so again, it might be that you gain some big advantage on the market, and so some market power, but it's not because you are entrenching your position. It's because you are innovating and providing more efficient products. Last thing is that you have also, one way to prove that is that you have to show how you pass on the gains of adopting AI to consumers. So it's not only about increasing margin, but it's also about, launching new products and providing some additional products to additional benefits to consumers.
Thank you. But just you want to have a reaction? Yeah.
No, I think just the lawyer's perspective is that I mean, we tend to reason in sort of binary or category terms. For me, when I try to see what the challenges are, basically there's the ex ante and the ex post. Ex post, you prepare your efficiency narrative, and here's where economists come in to help with the efficiency narrative. To explain basically how your technology is improving consumer welfare and the innovation and so on. But ex ante, when you work on the compliance methods, basically your objective is to be able to explain and to prepare for these audits or auditability of your system. So I think for me the important point from a legal perspective also to sort of try to strike the right balance between protecting innovation and at the same time ensuring compliance is that you don't disclose you're not forced to disclose your trade secrets. I mean, transparency and fighting opacity is not disclosing everything and giving access to everything, but being able to explain. And this comes with understanding first how your AI tools work, document that, and be able to show that the criteria that you use are objective, transparent, and non-discriminatory. So for me, basically boils down to that from a legal perspective.
Yeah, and Emmanuel, just because you just told me that you came from the US, and maybe one question for you is, do you think all these constraints we talk about, because uh, does it constrain, does it, do you block, sorry, does it compromise the dynamic of innovation? Because we talk about a lot about that Europe must not be the only area of the world which has been very regulated, and because we know that China, US, are not regulated that the AI in that way. So maybe some words from your perspective in that point.
Yeah, so I mean, short answer is yes, but I try to develop a bit more. So the answer would be yes, but you can also design regulations that are not going to constrain innovation too much, and so you have to be careful when you set up these regulations. So I would love to tell you about some impact assessment of the AI Act or the DMA, but I don't know of any, so I won't. But I think what's interesting is that we can look at the impact of the GDPR, which is slightly older, and so that might tell us something about how regulation is going to potentially affect the market and potentially the AI market. Um, and what's interesting is that there is some research by economists, and they all point to pretty large negative effects of the GDPR on various dimensions. So very briefly, there is a study comparing startups in Europe and in the US and the rest of the world before and after the implementation of GDPR. And they found that fewer deals were financed and that the effects were especially strong for startups with data and intensive activities. So, that tells us, well, that might have something to do with GDPR because that's mostly firms using data. Other researchers, they look at the Google Store apps. They had data about, I guess, some 4 million apps on the store. And they found that after GDPR, a third of the apps exited the market and that entry fell by half. So these are extremely large effects. So, there is some debate within the economic community about whether, it's that large. But still, I mean, so large that you think, well, something is happening around there. And so that points to a cost to innovation. There are other studies that found that actually the websites tend to decrease data sharing. So, that's the point of GDPR. So that works. But they found also that because of that, the websites started to use mostly pretty large web technology vendors. So they dropped all the small firms, and that increased the concentration on the web technology market, which is not what you would expect from the regulation, or what you don't want that from the regulation. We have also some case level study, notably in Germany, where we found that it changed the type of innovation on the market from radical innovation to incremental innovation. So many consequences in terms of financing, in terms of innovation, and so on. Does that apply to AI? Well, it might, because as I said, data is a key input of the AI process. And so regulation about data may have a significant impact as it did for the GDPR. So, it remains to be proved and measured, but, that tells us something, I guess. Just maybe on a positive note is that knowing this, it says, well, if you want to regulate data access or, access to computing power, whatever, all these key inputs to the production of AI, then you should factor the consequences into the design of regulation. So that doesn't say, the message is not, well, regulation is necessarily bad, but, it does have some consequences and you have to take that into account.
Thank you very much. Maybe my last question for Juliette is about the future. Let's have a look to the future and guidance. And according to you, from your internet perspective, what are the form of guidance that would help maintain innovation while ensuring compliance?
Yeah, I say as an early adopter of AI and a company using technology to reduce friction in this very complex travel industry, Booking.com is well positioned to help define standards and best practices for responsible AI development, and we're an active contributor to regulatory discussions on this topic. And we really want to help shape effective AI policies and regulations. And we provide the context to the challenges and the opportunities that can exist for customers and for companies. Here, the key points I wanted to flag. One is on protecting data from being used without consent. And so we advocate for protection of IP rights. Another point on if you look at agentic AI, now we really advocate for a functional approach. So if and where agentic AI performs the function of an intermediation service, it should basically be subject to the same rules and regulations as more traditional intermediaries. And third, I think very importantly for all companies, we need regulatory frameworks that can stand the test of time, and that also avoids fragmentation as much as possible, because regulatory frameworks might stop at borders, but AI and innovation doesn't. So on a European level, we welcome the AI Act and the risk-based approach that was adopted, because not all AI applications should be regulated the same way. And we also welcome alignment between regulators and international standards wherever that's possible.
Thank you very much, both of the three of us, of you. Maybe, yeah, I will ask to Paolo, but 5 minutes for questions. Okay. Okay, so we are late, but we are authorized by the big boss to have some questions.
Well, thank you. Just two short questions. I don't know about the answer, but you don't have to answer. Number one, I mean, we know that AI blurs the border or the frontier between tacit and explicit collusion. I still don't know exactly how do we go about it. Emmanuel told us about sort of a protocol, what we should be looking at. My big fear is that competition authorities simply do not have the resources to do that, or at least right now, notwithstanding the fact that competition authorities, across the EU have been setting up these sort of AI units. But I mean, it's going to be very difficult, okay? And the blurring, the increased blurring between tacit and explicit collusion is a big problem, and so is a big problem also going through all the protocols to deal with the 102. The second one is the following: we have across the Atlantic someone at the White House that says um, that implies that the DMA and AI Act and so forth were designed just to hurt American companies. Well, it just happens that Google, Amazon are American companies, but I mean, so what? But the thing is, and taking the point raised by our Dutch colleague at the plenary session, there is a question of, raw economic power here. So not so much what my question is not so much what national competition authorities are going to do, but what the DG Comp is going to do, because there might be a reaction from the other side of the Atlantic, and it will hurt us. So how do we go about convincing the US that it's not a question of going after American companies in an unfair way, because the DMA goes after whatever platform, okay, American or not. I don't know about China, but I know about the position right now from the US, and it's worrisome. So what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very relevant questions. On the first one, I'll take a try because I think I think really the core problem. How do you prove an algorithmic collusion? Because it's very well established case law of the European Court of Justice that intelligently adapting to the behavior, to the conduct of your competitors is not collusion. So you are in your right to gather market intelligence and to adapt your own market conduct without infringing competition law and without reducing your autonomy. It's just intelligently adapting to market conditions. And you may say that's what companies do. Well, they use AI tools because, well, AI is intelligence. It's artificial intelligence. So I think the main difficulty here is from a pure legal perspective, how to prove the agreement. It's one question that AI obviously does not have um, autonomy of mind, and you cannot say that AI, two algorithms or two AI tools agree just because they have algorithms that allow to collect information and to align their conduct based on the information. But in the end, it's public information most of the time. So can we push the boundaries of competition law to say that, well, it is tacit collusion because the outcome is that, well, it's a concerted practice and it can be apprehended by competition law? I'm not so convinced, so I'm a bit skeptical. But it's true that on your first point, there is about the resources of competition authorities. They are scarce, and it's even more difficult for them to detect such behavior. So that's why I think, for me, one of the reasons why regulation has become so abundant lately is so you try to solve this problem by just imposing ex ante solutions. And on your second question, I think the answer it's difficult from a legal perspective. I think it's more or less political, and we have seen the answer of DG Comp and the representatives of the European Parliament who responded to Trump's concerns about and American concerns about bias in regulation and wanting to go after American companies. But the proof is that, well, Booking is not an American company and still a gatekeeper with the obligation to respect the obligations under the DMA and AI and so on. So in all objectively, it's not an anti-American act. It turns out that a lot of American companies fall into the scope of those regulations, but not alone. And also American companies benefit from, this is basically the answer of the European Commission, American companies benefit from these obligations because there are many small startups or other companies that are the primary beneficiaries of those obligations. So I personally don't have the another answer than this one.
I'm sorry, I think it will be the only question because we need now to have a coffee break for 15 minutes before the next one. Thank you very much.